traction milling, that's the other option. That's process grinding small rib texture into the concrete that gives 360 degrees traction with every step that the cow makes. So you've got, pretty much firm support. There's no slip and catch thing. We developed that in the mid-90s. AGRI-TRAC, the traction milling, works very well going over top of existing grooving. It even works better if there isn't any grooving, because you got less manure on the floor.
All right, welcome everybody to this episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. I'm your host for today, Gail Carpenter. I'm joined by Tom Woodall from AGRI-TRAC Inc. Tom is the owner of AGRI-TRAC, which was founded in 1997, but he has been working in barn renovations since 1975. So a wealth of experience that he comes in with. And Tom, I'm going to kick it off by asking you, why is lameness an issue?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. There's a lot of factors that come into play with lameness in today's dairy herds. The nutrition, genetics, disease, injury, environment. Overall, lameness can make a cost to the producer of over $300 per cow per incidence. And when the general consensus is that lameness in a dairy herd is anywhere between 20 and 50%, if you can reduce that cost, that's your new profit in these times of tight margins and everything. So, that's you can gain a lot that way, by reducing it as much as possible. And to be part of that on the environment side, where the hoof meets the floor, so to speak, that's why I do what I do, is because it's really good to be part of that solution. Helping cows and producers and hoof trimmers. They're all partners in trying to eliminate lameness and the costs associated with it as much as possible. And I got to give credit to, the hoof trimmers and the producers and the cows, because I've learned it all from them, not out of a book.
Yeah. So I think that leads us into the next question, which is, what are your experiences with barn floors throughout the years?
Okay, great. Well, I've seen and worked in the evolution of, dairy barns and cows, the changes that have taken place over the last 60 years. Tie stall barns with 20 to 50 cows was the norm when I was growing up, and in my early career in the 70s and 80s, I was modernizing those barns by ripping out the old stanchions and making the stalls wider and longer for the cows. The modern cow now is, almost twice the size as it was when those barns that were being built in the 20s and 30s. So, there's been a lot of changes. Freestall barns were still kind of a novelty in the 70s, and oftentimes they were a disaster because, they had a lot of ventilation problems and everything, trying to figure out the ventilation and loose housing. And it wasn't long before they figured out that the solution to that was to just create a new design barn with the engineers and the farmers and the contractors, and just start out with a whole new facility and renovate the old barn for housing for the calves and the heifers and that sort of thing. So, with the building of these new barns, you could have bigger parlors, and now they have robotic milking. So, it's there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of changes. But as with everything, there's always a trade-off. Temple Grandin, she's great for always quoting that there's always a trade-off. Nothing's free. And the result is that you got larger herds and less effort and work for the farmer because of the modern equipment that's been developed for feeding and manure handling and all that sort of thing. So, we think, well, what could be the downside of that? But the downside is that the cows have to walk everywhere instead of the farmer, and they have to walk to get water, to eat, to get milked, and sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, depending on how often you're getting milked. And, on the average, a cow walks half a mile or 2 kilometers every day. And that leaves more opportunity for stepping on a stone or wearing down the hooves or, slipping and falling. So, if we can, those are all potential causes of lameness. And if we can eliminate some of them, it would be hard to do completely, but if we can eliminate some of them, that would, it can be done with management and maintenance.
Absolutely.
Tired of seeing your herd slip and fall? At AGRI-TRAC, our traction milling process transforms your barn floors with 360 degrees of traction, reducing slips and falls while improving cow comfort and preventing lameness, resulting in a healthier herd and a more profitable farm. Visit AGRITRACTION.com to learn how we can help keep your herd healthy and your bottom line strong.
So what is out there in terms of barn floors, and how does this affect cows?
You've had a lot of guests previously that I've heard the podcast, and they're just great with talking about management of lameness and all the different things that you can do. But I kind of like to focus on the creation and maintenance of the biggest part, or the biggest piece of farm equipment on every dairy farm. We need to look at that sort of thing.
So what is that? What is the biggest piece of farm equipment?
Well, it's funny, the routine, regular maintenance of tractors, trucks, milking equipment, that's all done on a regular basis, sometimes daily. Thankfully, the concept of regular maintenance with the cows, and their hooves is becoming commonplace now, with good hoof trimming and the hoof trimming practices that these professionals have. Regular scheduled hoof trimming, it can be viewed as an investment, not an expense. The control and reduction of lameness. A hoof trimmer friend told me one time, he says, we can invest in bigger, faster fire trucks, but why don't we just invest in fire prevention? And that's what a good hoof trimmer does, is he works on the prevention of the fires that start on cows' hooves, basically. So the cows are what makes the money on the dairy farm, not that bright, shiny tractor or new tractor. So focus on the cows. They're the ones that make the money. So
that's right.
Yeah. Now, the largest piece of equipment on the farm that's used every day, every minute for years and years, and it's often the most neglected, is the barn floors themselves. It's durable, but it's not indestructible. Especially when you look at the most important part of the floor, and that's the surface. Where the hoof meets the road, so to speak. I spent 25 years of my life breaking out 4 to 6 inches of perfectly good concrete, because the top eighth of an inch was wrong. So it was it was my back more than my brain that helped me to try and figure out what we could do, to change that top eighth of an inch rather than having to pour a whole new floor.
So what happens to floors that make them so slippery?
Oh, there's so many variables. Did your floor go to the lowest bidder who was building the new barn? 1500 psi concrete looks pretty much the same as 4000 psi concrete to most people. Sand bedding in barns, the floors wear down much faster than if you're using straw and shavings. Automatic alley scrapers, they're more gentle on a floor than going in there with a skid steer or a payloader and propping the front wheels all up and grinding away at the concrete. So yeah, those are all things that wear down a floor. Oftentimes in floors, the texture isn't worn down at all. It's actually filling up with lime and minerals and things. The lime from the cow beds gets kicked out onto the floor and basically turns into mortar. And minerals from the water and the urine, they get left behind on the floor due to evaporation, from heat and air movement and that sort of thing. So that all gets stuck to the floor and becomes part of a floor. And that gradually eliminates any form of traction that you would have. I've seen a lot of barns too that in the past 15 years or so that have been poured with way too much slope. The theory was that you want a clean, dry floor, so they slope the floors in, to make the liquid run off and leave the solids. Well, what happens then is that the solids get smeared back and forth like peanut butter, then dries into like a 3/4 inch layer of chipboard that's greasy and slippery. You want a clean floor, not a dry floor. And if you separate the liquids from the solids, you can't get either one of them. So, that's the downside of that. So, yeah, there's a lot of things happening to the barn floors on a daily basis that nobody sees or cares to check. So under that layer of manure, there's all kinds of things going on. And one of your other guests coined a term that I really like, and it fits perfectly with this. It's easy to be barn blind. You see something happening often enough in a barn, and it just becomes normal. There's a hole in the floor. There's a leaky water trough. Slipping on this one crossover, lower heat detection. A particular gate or stall that the cows don't like to go to. Well, it's always been that way. That's what barn blind is. So, yeah. She also had a tip about making a barn layout map, and I really like that. You put it on a cork board, and for the employees or the farmer himself, in a smaller operation, when he sees something, he's got different colored push pins that you can, pinpoint there and kind of keep track of what's going on, whether it's, there's more cows, more lame cows in this one particular group or pen, or, less heat detection. There's all kinds of things like that, that I really like that hint and tip that she had, that would be a good one to do for everybody, I would think.
So if a producer's seeing problems with their flooring, what are the options?
Okay, well, there's a lot of different options that weren't out here compared to 30 years ago. basically there's about three major ones. Some last longer, some are cheaper, some it's up to the owner to do due diligence to find out what's the most appropriate for his barn and his situation in different areas of the barn. Even, so often in every geographical area, they have a guy that does his thing, and they keep doing it because we've always done it that way, barn blind. Mm-hmm. And, these days of tight margins and, profit or loss, it's good for people to do due diligence and look for the payback for every dollar that they spend. Nobody buys seed or fertilizer or equipment or livestock or labor, without knowing where the payback is. So with concrete floors, there's really only about three options that last for any length of time and are still good for the cows. Traditional grooving, that's been around for a long time. They're grooves that are cut into the floor about every 3 or 4 inches, about a half an inch deep. And, that was developed sometime back in the 60s when outside feed bunks and concrete yards became popular for the tie stall barns, with 50 cows and that sort of thing. Gives them some exercise. The grooving gets you about a 30% improvement on traction, but it still works on a slip and catch. When the cow's foot slips, hopefully it gets caught in the groove and stops. But these areas of larger herds and bigger barns from the travel areas that the cows are having to go, those sharp edges and the slip and catch and everything, it can shave off the sole and cause traumatic injuries too, with that slip and catch. It's like jamming your thumbnail over, and then sticking it in manure for 2 weeks. It's kind of the same concept. And when the grooving stops working, it's best not to re-groove it, because when you start doing that, you're actually taking away from the surface area of the floor to support the cow's hoof. So you got more pounds per square inch of pressure because you've got less area of floor, and you've also got 2 or 3 times the manure storage that's still sitting on that floor. The digital dermatitis and other hoof diseases live in. So, that's kind of the thumbnail sketch on grooving. It works, but it has its downsides. Traction milling, that's the other option. That's process grinding small rib texture into the concrete that gives 360 degrees traction with every step that the cow makes. So you've got, pretty much firm support. There's no slip and catch thing. We developed that in the mid 90s. AGRI-TRAC, the traction milling, works very well going over top of existing grooving. It even works better if there isn't any grooving, because you got less manure on the floor. You go over the grooving and, you still got that manure that's in the grooves, being held in there. It's also the only process that they can do on precast slats. We worked in conjunction with the slat manufacturers in developing it back in the 90s, and because it had to be high speed, lightweight, low vibration, not take away any of the structural integrity of the slat, which happens when you do the traditional grooving. They hit rebar every once in a while, and then that rusts and swells and cracks, and then you got a section of slats and 3 cows down in the pit. So seen that a few times.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, it's not good. Yeah, so we can. What we do with the traction milling, we can get about 80% of traction because we don't have that slip and catch thing, and you can't duplicate pasture on concrete, but we can get you pretty close. The machines are custom made and patented. The term traction milling and AGRI-TRAC, it's trademarked in Canada and US. So if it doesn't say AGRI-TRAC, it's not true traction milling. There's been a lot of people that buy scarifiers and scabblers and that sort of thing, trying to duplicate what we do, and it always ends up less effective or too aggressive. That's the problem, is that you got to find that sweet spot where it's a good balance of both. And rubber flooring, that's become quite big. That's the third option that a lot of people have, is rubber flooring, but it comes with its own set of problems, and it's expensive, to put rubber flooring in the milking parlor, a low slope holding area. It's not so good in steep holding areas, but low slope, it's great. It gives the cows, some relief from being on concrete, makes them more comfortable so that they can, let the milk down and prepare, for the milking. So that's always good. And, that's pretty easy to see the payback on that. But, to do a whole barn in rubber, it's pretty expensive to, to go on the promise that the cows are more comfortable.
Right.
It's, I've seen it so many times. Oh, the cows are more comfortable. Yeah, but where do I get the money back? Oh, they're more comfortable. No, where's the payback? Well, the cows are more comfortable. It's often sold on emotion rather than financial payback. I've seen a lot of rubber that was, cost $10 a square foot, and it was ripped out, 5 years later. So that's $2 a square foot per year that stuff cost you. And you still got to do something after you rip it out, to get the traction on the floor that you covered up. So there's probably something out there that would last longer at the fraction of the cost.
Is there anything that can be done with new floors while they're being poured that's good for the cows?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The trick is to not disturb the stones below the surface of the concrete when it's still fluid. There's a thin layer of sand and Portland cement when you smooth off the concrete. And if you drag a broom through that mix too early, it pulls all the stones up, and you've got all these puncture points and pressure points, and that's not good for the cows. And so you want to wait for the proper time of the concrete being set, that you can put a broom finish on it, and it doesn't disturb that layer of stones. A broom finish like that, if done properly, in a scrape alley, you get about a year. in less traffic areas, like walkways and that sort of thing, it'll last considerably longer because it doesn't have the scraper wear and traffic on it. But yeah, you can get 4 to 5 years out of that, and it doesn't cost you really anything to do it. So yeah, there's a roller texture that you can put on concrete floors. I've done quite a bit of it in the past, and you can do that, but it's imperative that you get it done at the right time of the concrete setting. If you do it too late, it doesn't leave much of an imprint. If you do it too early, you're going to take the hooves off of the cows in a week. I've seen it so many times that we've been called in on to a farm. The contractors poured the concrete, on a Friday afternoon, and they're wanting to get away for the weekend, and they just give it a slap hazard finish, and it's not right, rather than waiting for it to be the right curing. And we get a frantic call on Tuesday to come and smooth it out.
Oh, that makes my fingers hurt. Yeah, you've mentioned imprinting patterns on concrete. Is that something people can do?
It was a big thing in the 90s and the early O's to try and save some money, but it's not widely recommended anymore. When you push down on wet concrete, somewhere it has to come up. Just a simple displacement theory. And what results is a floor that starts looking like an upside down muffin tin. And that's not real good for the cows, So, cows need a flat, even surface, especially if they're doing a lot of walking. If they're walking on domes or uneven floor levels, that's a recipe for 50 to 60% lameness right there. We've been called out to a lot of farms, not because the cows are slipping, but just to level off those domes. Like you got concrete that's domed, and that causes a lot of bruising and white line problems in the hooves. And it's generally the hoof trimmers that can you do something about that? So yeah, we've done a lot of that. It wasn't slipping. It's that dome effect that we were trying to get away from. So yeah, so that's what happens when imprinting.
All right. So what inspired you to develop an option that didn't exist previously?
Well, okay. Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. Growing up on the farm at home when I was a kid, there was this one corner. We milked about 22 cows, and there was this one corner that they had to go in and out of, 4 times a day. And it was sloped, and it was just like glass. And all that we could do was, try and get them to go gently. And when they fell, you just prayed that they got back up. Like, but that was the way it always was. And barn blind again.
Yep.
So when grooving became a thing, when they invented that, it was a massive machine, and the diamond blades were exceedingly expensive. Back in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't a common thing. But as the decades flew by, and they came up with less costly blades that worked as well, and that the groovers just kept that expensive price, so 'cause they were the only game in town. So if they could use cheaper blades but still charge the same amount of money, that that was fair game, I guess. But as I mentioned previously, 25 years on top of an air hammer, I had lots of time to, think, that there's got to be a better way, and so we worked away at trying to change that top eighth of an inch and find that sweet spot that gave you good traction that lasted a fairly long time and wasn't too abrasive or damaging to the cows. And I've still got a whole pile of junk out of the shop that didn't work as we worked on this, but we finally found it, and it worked well locally. And, so then the challenge was to see if it worked everywhere. And I spent another 25 years crisscrossing Canada, in different geographical regions and climates. Worked in, Manitoba in February, and they don't call it winter peg for nothing. You get excited when you hear that the temperature's going up to minus 15. It's
boy.
But we spent a lot of time, 25 years, making sure that it worked everywhere. And we've been in the Northeast United States, Pennsylvania, New York, all up and down the eastern seaboard there. We've been established there for, over 10 years, and we're having the same results, so, and the positive results. So, we're wanting to expand further into the U.S. market, but it's so huge compared to Canada that we're just not sure where to start. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to chat, so, I'd love to get some help in figuring out just how we can do that. So
if people want to reach out to you with ideas, how can they get in touch with you?
They can call our toll-free number. That works in, Canada and U.S., 1-877-966-3546, or email tom@agritraction.com. So there's we got a AGRI-TRAC.com website. We got AGRI-TRAC website. So and both of those have web inquiries. So shoot us a message or a line or a question. Love to talk with you.
And if there's nothing else, I think we're going to hop into the 3 questions that we ask all of our guests.
Sound good.
It's time for our famous 3. Your cattle are constantly threatened by the exposure of mycotoxins in feed. Now you can know if mycotoxins are present in your feed and what you should do about it. 𝗬𝗬𝗪 offers a range of analytical services to assess the mycotoxin contamination and solutions to combat mycotoxins. Don't let mycotoxins contaminate your performance. Visit dsmfirmenich.com/mycotoxin-survey to learn more. That's dsm-firmenich.com/mycotoxin-survey.
All right. So the first one, as you know, is what is your favorite dairy-related book or resource?
I would have to think it was Temple Grandin's books. She's an amazing lady. I've met her several times, and I can relate. She talks about thinking in pictures.
Yeah,
that's how my mind works. Is I think in pictures. I see it. I don't think about it. It's weird, but anybody that has that same ability, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Some people don't have a mind's eye. I found that out.
That's it. The mind's eye. That's what. Yeah.
All right. So what is your favorite non-dairy related book or resource?
Anything to do with history. Like I've just given you a thumbnail sketch of the dairy industry over the past 60, 70 years. And so I've gotten to that magic age where I've seen history. I'm not reading about it. It's I've seen it, and it's quite the trip. Just in 60 years. So you can. I enjoy reading about things that happened 100 years ago, or or even further. Just I can appreciate the evolution and unraveling of history.
So what do you think sets successful dairy professionals apart from those that are not successful?
There's a story that I like to tell. I don't know if we got time for a story.
Absolutely, we do.
Okay. When I was a teenager, we used to go roller skating, with the old 4-wheel roller skates. And my grandfather said, "Why don't they just put wheels on them in line like ice skates?" This is in the 70s. And I said, "Oh, Grandpa, that never worked. That never worked." And well, he I crushed his spirit, unfortunately, because I says, somebody smarter than you would have thought about that a long time ago, if that was possible. And he actually went and bolted a couple of buggy wheels on an old pair of ice skates. And but when I told him that it would never work or whatever, he hung them up in the drive shed and died a year later. And I looked at those damn skates, for a lot of years afterwards, hanging up there, and thinking, maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't. But what they come out in the 80s, inline roller skates. I felt awful because I doubted somebody's good ideas. An innovative process. And developing this AGRI-TRAC, I got a lot of that. That never worked. That never worked. And there's a fine line between being bullheaded and confident.
Yeah.
And I was confident that it would work. And I think it's that way with anybody, whether they're a dairy producer or what. Be innovative. Think outside of the box. If you're just doing as you're told, you're never going to come up with something new. And so that's my little anecdote about bucking the trend and being secure in your own confidence. And that's what dairy producers have to do every day.
Well, I think that probably is why the dairy industry has evolved the way it has, is because people take on new ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it with the developing of the barns and the ventilation, and there's been so many innovative thinkers, and there's been a lot of times even innovative thinkers, it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. But that's part of the process. Yep,
that's how you find out it doesn't work. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. So
well, I think that is a lovely note for us to end on. Thank you, Tom, for joining us today for this episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. Thanks to all our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, thank you for having me. That's been great. I really enjoyed it, and hope that there's some tips or hints that somebody can take home and do with what they've heard today. Thank you again.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, thank you.